that in, guys. Can I change that one line? You follow me?
Right,
so I keep creating. Right. I keep creating. And so it's just one of those things.
The dude who read it at least sound a little like you?
Oh, no. Wait. I'm drawing a blank. Why am I drawing a blank? Blair. Jeez. Blair Underwood.
Okay.
Blair Underwood. First of all, we kind of had kids in common. Our kids went to the same school.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say we had kids in common, no, we didn't have the same thing.
Right.
No, but we had kids at the same time, and so we met back then. But what I love about him is he understands the, I call it the middle class approach to my life. In other words, he understood the fact that did we grow up in the rural South? Did we struggle? Did we say no? It's not that kind of struggle. We had a struggle of understanding our identity and how to take that forward as artists. And he understood the humor. I love his voice because it's not so identifiable that if it was a Morgan Freeman, I'm just giving that as a perfect example, and I love Morgan,
right.
But it's too identifiable. I want somebody who can tell a joke and it sounds like Lionel.
Right.
He had that quality. And so when I said, no, I want you.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
During my day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
We just met. Wayne Dyer. Do we have Wayne Dyer on the podcast ever? Like way back in the day?
I was on a cruise we had the same publisher, Hay House, is our publisher, and we were on a cruise just off Australia. Of course, the sun's out there, and Wayne came out, and he's got a very shiny head. He said, Greg Braden. I said, yeah. He says, you see this? And I said, yeah. He said, this is a solar panel for a sex machine.
Okay.
And I couldn't match that, So I said, well, you see this? I said, every one of these hairs is a highly advanced, finely tuned antenna to higher dimensional state spaces of information. And so that was our joke about hair and no hair.
Imagine if that's what made you enlightened, how much hair you had, and when it started to fall out, you got dumber.
Like I said, they every decade of my life, they're saying if you have it this decade, you can keep it. So when I hit my 70s, they said you got this you can probably keep it. So
if you have minoxidil, if you got really good at it today, and there's a bunch of different DHT inhibitors that are topical that they can use. My friend Derek from Derek More Plates More Dates, it's a website. He's got a bunch of protocols on how to save your hair. So people want to save their hair. But we were talking about Art Bell when we came in here because there's a photograph of art on the wall that was one of the most important things for me to put up. We talked about it, and Jamie and I were like, oh, we got to get a metal picture of Art Bell, because that was the guy, man. When I was driving home from the Comedy Store at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was listening to AM radio Coast to Coast with Art Bell from the Kingdom of Dye. It was my favorite. This was all, for me, it was kind of pre-internet too. The internet existed, but it wasn't the thing that it is now. There was the podcasts.
No, but the crazy thing is the stuff that was on that program that was all fringe is what everybody's talking about every day at lunch right now.
Area 51, Bob Lazar, totally mainstream.
He was so kind to me. He had me on this program before I had my first book. I self-published my first 2 books, and I was doing talks all over up and down the West Coast. up into Vancouver, and he had heard somebody in his shop had been to one of those talks, and he invited me on. No book, and then he had me on a number of times after that, and so I was very honored to be on there, and we talked about everything, man. That was the thing, you could talk about anything you wanted to talk about.
It was also like art was a show where you could get real information and you could also get complete horseshit, and you had to be able to discern what is what, but Art treated everyone with equal respect. Like, you could call him up, Art, I'm a werewolf. He'd be like, interesting, tell me more. It was never like, bitch, you're not a werewolf. You're just mentally ill. You need to get some Prozac or whatever they give you.
Well, you still got to be discerning today. I think I say it's...
Well, today you more so than ever because of AI and because of bots and
I always say
what's going on.
I think it's important to have an open mind, but not a gaping mind. And there are a lot of
unfortunate use of terminology, but yes, I agree wholeheartedly.
Part of the reason for that, and this, we have a global audience. A lot of those people are very hurt, unresolved hurt. They're right on the edge. They're very fragile personalities.
Yeah, that's true.
And what they hear on the radio can be interpreted in a million different ways. And it's, I think there's a responsibility that comes with saying things. If you're going to say it, make sure it's accurate.
Yeah, and your intention, like, what are you trying to do? Like, I'm never trying to hurt someone's feelings.
Right.
If someone's listening, I want you to have a better life. I want your life to be better. And this is an interesting thing about whether it's bots or whether it's, an actual human being talking about stuff. The way you approach life, and the way the people around you approach life is very contagious. And if you're doing it in a very positive and a loving way, in a friendly way, in a communal way, that's contagious. It's really good. It's good for everybody. Yeah. But if you're bitter and shitty, it's bad for everybody. What Art was like very friendly and fascinated by all these things, and he was a real pro. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just like, so when I did his show, it was like one of the highlights of my life. And I got to do the internet version. I never got to do the radio version. So he was on the internet at a time. I don't think he was. Maybe he was on some radio stations, but mostly I think it was an internet thing. But I was like, yes, I'm on with Art Bell.
Yeah, mine was all by phone. It was all landlines.
Yeah, I was on my phone too.
Those days.
I did it from my house on the internet. I think I did it, with a headset or something. But I did.
Well, he paved the way, and we're here today.
Well, he made interesting subjects. Like I remember when they were talking about things like the face on Mars. And you're like, what? That sounds so kooky. And then you see pictures, you go, hey, man, what is that? Why don't I hear about that in school?
Yeah, well, we had Richard Hoagland on night after night after night after night for weeks on end when that came out. That face on Mars had a lot to do with my career path, actually.
Undefeated. So what is your take on all this? Because one of the things that happened was with the face on Mars is the initial images were very grainy, but
thank you, sweet dreams. I hope you feel better.
It did kind of look like a face, but maybe even more remarkable, because sometimes there's faces like in the side of a rock, it looks like a face. More remarkable was the geometric pattern of the base of it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of dismissed that when the second images came out. So this is the original image. This is the original image that freaked everybody out. They were like, oh my God, there's a face on Mars. And then they came up with these upgraded images, and I was like, well, that's not a face. It's just weird shadows, and it's probably just a mountain. But man, that's an odd shape.
Or that face has been doctored.
It could be true.
Yeah.
But also, then I looked at it and was like, that shape is interesting. Like, it almost looks unnatural. Then the new images from very close to Cydonia that show a very clear square. This one's nuts, because this one is somewhere in the neighborhood of between plus 300 meters. Like, they don't know how much longer it is than 300 meters, but it's the minimum size of this thing is 300 meters across. And it's a full-on square. Right angle, right. It's like, what the hell is that?
Well, as a geologist, I was fascinated when Hoagland first started talking about what was happening here.
What's up, Jamie? Oh, that one. Yeah. The one that we bring up all the time.
Which one though?
Oh, it don't matter.
Some of
Just
them are
click
doctored.
on any of them.
Some of them are doctored though.
Yeah, the non-doctored one, the one next to it, like right there. Look at that. That's absolutely crazy.
So I don't know if I'm very familiar with this image. I don't know if you can see with your mind's eye. You're looking the lower left. That's a 90-degree angle. If you can see the rest of the 90-degree angle up at the top and over at the side, if you can trace out, that is one massive right there. Now you can see it. Yeah, the computer has cleaned it up. Nature does not work in 90-degree angles. You're not going to get wind erosion. Wind is called aeolian erosion. Fluvial erosion is water erosion. You're not going to get 90-degree angles from wind or water. So one of the tenets in archaeology, when you see 90-degree angles, there's an intentionality underlying that structure. If it were a one-off, you could say maybe it's a fluke, and it's not. And this is on Mars. Jamie, I don't know if you can do this. Through Freedom of Information, NASA had to release all of the lunar images up through the Clementine mission. And they didn't want to do that. And when they did release them, they ended up pixeling out a whole bunch of stuff, which made it look even more obvious than it was.
They're just fucking with us at this point.
So you got to say, what is it on the lunar surface that we paid for with our tax dollars that we're not supposed to be seeing? And these were tower structures. Can you see the Clementine?
Are there any undoctored, unblurred versions of it that some
I haven't seen them in the public. I haven't seen them in the public domain.
But you've seen them privately?
No. What I'm saying is, through Freedom of Information,
have you ever seen the undoctored images?
No. What they were forced to release. Why in the world would they be pixelating the images that are on there that actually make them look even more obvious than they are? So what we're seeing, what Hoagland was talking about, what you're seeing on Mars is not happening in the vacuum. It's happening. We're seeing the same thing on the lunar surface to varying degrees. On Mars, there were 3-sided, 4-sided, 5-sided pyramids.
Look at the one in the upper right-hand corner. That's odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very odd.
So here's the kicker. We're sending the Viking probes, Viking 1, Viking 2, in the 70s, went to Mars. 19,000 images were captured from the orbiting part of the mission. The other craft landed on the surface, and I can just imagine being on the surface seeing this. It's like this thing's like a spider comes down the cloud of dust, and this little tube pops up, and some sticky dental floss stuff shoots out, and then they reel it in to collect dirt and microbes, and they reel it into broth because they're looking for evidence of life on Mars, and it's happening next to massive monuments and geometric structures that are now dated about 50,000 years BP before present. So they're looking for microbes and signs of life next to the most massive signs of life that you could imagine.
These, you said they're dated to 50,000 BC, these structures? BP before present.
Before present, yeah.
So how do they know that?
Those were... when the Cydonia mission, that's the Cydonia scientists are estimating 50,000 years, and the same with the lunar. I mean, I'm hesitating.
But the Sidonian, how do they estimate that? If they're using probes from that far away?
They're using probes, and I think geologically they're using, it's relative dating. They're looking at strata and things like that. And from the lunar sites, they brought back samples. And yeah, I'm hesitating because I don't know how deep you want to go with all this. But
as deep as you want.
Well, the samples that came back from the lunar surface had traces of metals that do not occur naturally in nature. They are the product of advanced machinery. And
what metals are these?
These were metals that came back when they brought back from the Apollo mission, and I think they brought back. Oh, I don't even remember the names. That's ones Jamie can look up. What the metals were that came back, and they don't know where those metals.
So is this metals from Cydonia, or is this metals from the moon?
This is from the lunar sites in the craters.
So the structures on the moon, how old they think they're the same age as the structures on Cydonia?
They're estimating 50,000 BP. There's a race for the moon right now, and I'm fascinated by this. There was a time only 2 nations on Earth had the money and the technology to go to the moon. It was the former Soviet Union and the former United States, because neither one's the same country anymore. And both those countries have been so broke, they haven't been able to do it. India and China are now sending the probes to the moon. We were going to the moon during the Cold War, and it was a crazy time. It was actually a very civilized war. I mean, the governments were at war, but the scientists were still cooperating. And there was an agreement that we would not share publicly what was found on the lunar surface. And Russia did the same thing. China was never part of that agreement. So China has said when they land, they're going to televise live what they find on the lunar surface to the people of the Earth. My sense, Joe, this will lead into a whole conversation we're going to have here. I think they'll find the archaeological structures that we know are there, that we've seen in the photographs. The inscriptions on those structures, we're going to be able to read, because there's a thinking that those structures are from ETs from another time, but the evidence suggests they're from us, from a time in our past, us working together until we destroyed one another through war, and that we're repeating that cycle again.
What happened to them?
Well, this is where I'm going with this. When they see what's on those temple walls, they're going to see inscriptions in languages that we already recognize, and that will be the smoking gun, like cuneiform.
Why do you think that?
Because this is what the researchers who are working on these projects right now, and they're combining this with so many of what the ancient texts have always told us. And this is where, it gets into a really a kind of a sticky conversation, because it depends on how people interpret these things. I'm excited for it for this reason. This is obviously no ordinary time in the history of our world, and they're pushing for war. We're on the verge of global war. What would it mean if we found on the surface, on the lunar surface, evidence of us, humans from another time, leaving a message in our own languages, cuneiform, Sanskrit, those kinds of things? It could be one of the most unifying factors right when we're on the precipice of war.
I completely agree, but we have to make a lot of leaps in order for that to be real. Like, we haven't seen any writing, so why would they assume that there's a bunch of different kinds of writing in different languages?
Actually, I think they have seen.
Who's that?
Well, when our space program, I think you've had guests on that talked about this in the past, I think. When our space program was active, there were broadcasts from the lunar surface that were cut off, and astronauts had seen things that they were not allowed to see and not allowed to share.
That's what I heard. It sounds fun. Yeah, it sounds really fun. I want to believe that.
Well, and some of them are leaving this world now, and on their deathbed, they can't believe that this hasn't been made public already. So there have been recordings and videos and things, and I think they're authentic.
Right, but this does it. Like, we haven't got boots on the ground in Cydonia, right? So
no, not Cydonia. Cydonia is Mars.
Well, exactly. So how are they seeing these inscriptions? Are you saying these inscriptions are on the moon?
Yeah, lunar surface. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. I was confused. So these astronauts are saying that on the surface of the moon, they saw writing.
They've seen structures.
Structures.
Massive structures.
But what about the writing
there? There were reports that they had seen the writing, but we can't verify those.
Okay. So this is just pothead talk.
Well, yes and no.
Kind of, a little bit, because if there's no evidence at all, that there's not even an interview with a guy who talks about when I was on the moon, I saw writing.
Well, then this is where you start going into the ancient texts.
Okay.
And the traditions that are relating our relationship to intelligences from beyond this world.
Yes, there's a lot of that.
And there's a lot of that.
There's a lot of that in various religions too. It's very fascinating.
Well, this is what I think is important. It is in religions, but I think you can break out their historical text and there's religious texts. So if you're reading the Bible, there's religion and history in the Bible. If you're looking at Sumerian Akkadian, Babylonian text from the Mesopotamian era, they're telling similar stories, and you've had guests on talking about this, where the stories are similar, but the religion is not part of that. And so I think what we're doing, we're kind of beating around the bush to a deeper conversation here, and that's why I've hesitated a couple of times, because I just don't want us to, to get so far down one side that.
Oh, don't worry about that. That's what this show's all about.
Okay, all right.
We should call the show Rabbit Holes. Because people are always in the middle of talking about one thing and they pivot. It doesn't matter.
Well, I think this is all tied into disclosure and what's happening, the reluctance to have the full disclosure.
Right. We've talked about that multiple times.
Yeah.
I'm sure were you in that documentary, The Age of Disclosure?
No.
You've been in a lot of documentaries.
I have been in a lot. I've been in a lot, and a lot of what I said was left on the cutting room floor.
Always.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. One thing I learned, Joe, and maybe you've learned this as well. If you're going to be in a documentary, ask if you are on the front end of the filming or the back end of the filming.
What does that mean?
Here's the reason. Are you one of the early interviews or are you one of the later interviews?
Okay.
And here's the reason. They'll develop an arc and a storyline. And if you're early on, they're going to ask you questions to support that arc and that storyline. 5 interviews down, somebody's going to come on and they're going to introduce something, and the producer will say, oh, there's a new arc and a new storyline, and now everything that you interviewed for may not be relevant in that conversation anymore. So,
well, I don't think you can control that. So
you can ask. You just ask. You say, where am I in the shooting process? And if you're the first one, say, maybe come back and interview me.
Yeah. So
a little bit later on.
Is it your belief that there was a civilization on Mars that were us, and that we migrated to Earth and then eventually populated Earth? Is that what you're thinking? Or that we coexisted in both places?
I think we did. And
it sounds so crazy to say.
Really?
And yeah, it does. It does. Well, you probably travel in different circles. But I mean, to the rational people, most people hear that and they go, what, there were people on Mars? But as time goes on and more discoveries, we find out just about the structures that are on Earth and how old they might be, and the actual age of Homo sapiens, like how old we might actually be. Where they found that skull in China the other day. That was, have you seen this? It's a 1,000,000-year-old Homo sapien skull, but apparently there's some debate about it. They're going back and forth. But at the very least, it's in the conversation of human beings possibly have existed, at least in this form, for 1,000,000 years, which is kind of nuts.
Yeah,
they found it in 1990.
What?
Yeah.
What, I found it the other day?
No.
So I read it on the BBC.
I know. I was going through the story yesterday. What happened was some team reconstructed parts of that skull with new methods that are now available. And they suggest that it could say that it was, I think it was actually one of those we've talked about, the big head, the longi.
Oh, right.
It's one of those.
Yeah,
that one's fascinating because that's a larger human being.
Was it Homo sapiens?
Yeah, well, they're
a branch from the Denisovans.
Okay. Right.
So this is the thing.
What is it called? Whatever.
I get confused. I remember longi was the thing that they were saying this.
Juliennes.
Yeah, okay, that is the other one.
That's it. That's the big-headed one.
I'm skeptical about those because they find one fragment and there's a lot of interpretation that's going on there. The consensus has been for a long time that we appeared. I'm just going to preface this by saying I'm a degree geologist. I believe in evolution. Evolution is a fact. I've seen it in the fossil record for plants, animals, insects. Darwin's theory of evolution breaks down when it comes to humans, and it breaks down for this reason. We now can do what used to sound like science fiction. If you ever saw the first Jurassic Park, where they pulled the DNA out of the fossilized remains of ancient forms of life, in the movie they brought them back to life. To the best of my knowledge, we haven't done that. What we have done is we can extract that DNA from the bone marrow of fossilized remains of beings that we used to believe were our ancestors. And what's happening is, and this is a mind blower, we know that we didn't descend from Neanderthal. We shared the earth with them, certainly, and some people have some Neanderthal DNA because of that, but we did not descend from them. And we didn't descend from many of the other forms that you see on those traditional trees. You know, you've got modern humans here and all these lines connecting. But if you look close at the lines, most of them are broken lines, Joe, because there's no solid evidence. It's called inferred or speculative relationships. I've got a picture of it here if we want to see that. But what they're showing is that we showed up about 200,000 years ago. Now there's a little evidence that may have been back as far as 300,000. But the kicker is that we can now look at the DNA and reverse engineer it and say, what did it take to get where we are? And what scientists are now calling the smoking gun, and there's still a lot of controversy around this, is human chromosome number 2. Human chromosome number 2 is the second largest chromosome in every cell of the body. It's got about 1,200 or so genes in that chromosome. And just one of them, gene TBR number 1, is responsible for most of the brain that we have for our neocortex. So our humanness, our empathy, sympathy, compassion, love, our cognitive abilities, the mirror neurons, all of these kinds of things are because that one gene. Well, where this gets really interesting is, where did chromosome 2 come from? And scientists have the answer, but they don't like the answer, because chromosome 2 is the product of a fusion. Proceedings from National Academy of Sciences, the volume of genetics, says this very clearly.
Names. Every day's a holiday, every meal's a feast. What's good in your neck of the woods, son?
2 is the product of an ancestral fusion.
How'd you find out about me, big dog?
I've been in the server for a good bit.
Okay, well, how'd you originally find out about me?
Me and my friends, we found you on Rumble a while back.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now I remember. All right, so how have things been for you recently?
Very good, Rabbi. I just ate graham crackers.
Oh, excellent. What kind?
The golden ones. I forgot the exact name. They're like a dark blue box, like a light blue box.
Yeah. All right. Very well.
Good check. The honey maid.
Honey maid, there you go. So what's on your agenda for this weekend?
I'm trying to get more organized.
Okay. So what are you trying to organize?
At the moment, my Google account for school.
Okay. Like a Google.
My tabs, so I don't have to sign in yourself anymore.
Okay. Do you use a password manager or no?
No.
Okay.
So I'm kind of setting up.
All right. Yeah, that's important.
I bet you have a password manager. You have like 100 accounts.
No, I don't, and I have like over 10,000. I use everything in my head.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. All right. So you've got to get all your tabs in order and bookmarks and stuff. Do you use the bookmarks bar?
Pretty much. Yeah, that's like what I'm needing right now.
Okay. Well, you seem like you know what you're doing. Yeah. Are you,
Just kind of procrastinating, seeing what you're doing.
Okay, well, I'm here to keep you company, but your big goal is to get yourself organized. So why don't you stay in here? We'll watch Joe Rogan, which is what we're doing with a bunch of people, and then you get your bookmarks organized. How's that sound?
Very good.
All right,
We'll
my
get
friend.
organized, Rabbi.
Enjoy, big dog. I'm here if you need me.
A telomere to telomere fusion of 2 pre-existing chromosomes. That does not happen in nature. It can't happen in nature. So here's what they're saying. You got two fully formed, fully functional chromosomes, and on the end are the telomeres that protect those chromosomes when the cells divide. And that's why they're on the end. They take the hit. It's a trauma in a cell when those chromosomes are pulled apart and some of the DNA doesn't make it. So nature puts telomeres on the end to take the hit, so the good DNA remains intact. And that's why it's on the ends. Human chromosome 2, those telomeres are right in the middle of the chromosome where they shouldn't be. because those chromosomes were fused together about 200,000 years ago when we appeared. And if that was the only one, you could say, well, maybe it's a fluke. Chromosome number 7. I'm a musician when I'm not doing what I'm doing now, long before I was a researcher. And one of the things I always used to wonder about, we share 98% of our DNA with chimpanzees, but you don't hear chimpanzees sing. You're never going to hear a chimpanzee sing Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven. And you ask, well, why not? I mean, 98% of the DNA is we share with them, but it's because of chromosome 7. And for 175 million years, this chromosome was stable in all primates, all of them, orangutan, gorilla, chimps, all the primates. All of a sudden, there was this little switch of a couple of genes that connected our tongue and our brain and our jaw, and we can sing and we can have complex speech like no other form of life. It happened 200,000 years ago. And what are the odds of that happening when chromosome 2 is fusing? So I've worked with scientists my whole life, both in academia and in the corporations. I was a problem solver for Fortune 500 companies through the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. And one of the things is that there is one way of thinking that says we take all the evidence and we force it into a pre-existing model, like all the new discoveries, trying to force that into Darwin's theory of evolution, or we allow the new evidence to lead to the story that it tells. And this is where science is stuck right now, because the old theory, Darwin's theory of evolution, is in trouble, and it's the DNA is the reason it's in trouble. It's no longer superficial or fossil evidence. I mean, the DNA is telling the story, and the new story suggests, at the very least, a scientist has to say there's been some kind of intelligent intervention. And this is where science gets stuck, because science says it's not equipped to talk about any kind of an intelligent intervention. But that ties in to everything that's happening now. If we're going to talk about ancient civilizations, or if we're going to talk about we've been here before, are we going to talk about, what it is that is the disclosure, all of those kinds of things. So science is kind of at a crossroads right now. There is something called the standard model, and that applies to evolution. And what the evidence suggests is we are the product of an intelligent and an intentional act. Who or what that is, that's where it can get sticky. The universe. We've had physicists on here, and really good physicists, and some of them are not aware of some of the new information that's come out now. But when I was in school back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I was taught that the universe is dead, inert, just cold, and we happen to be lucky biology. That's kind of what they used to teach. Now, physicists are suggesting the universe is alive, it is intelligent, and it's conscious. And one of the reasons for this, and you can go to the NASA website and you can look at some of these images, the James Webb Space Telescope, they're showing galaxies that are in proximity of something that is dangerous to them, like an exploding, whatever. And what they'll do is they'll create jets from the center, both directions, these jets that actually move them out of the way. And I talk about, I've got a new book, and I talk about that in the new book. So it's documented in the book. They actually move them to a safer place. And you say, well, maybe that's a fluke. It's a one-off. And now that they have found that, they found it happens time and time again.
So space itself is conscious in some form.
Conscious and intelligent. And those are two very different things. But that is a very different story. If our universe is alive and intelligent and conscious, and we're the product of an intentional act, we solve our problems, Joe, and we build our world based on the way we've been taught to think about ourselves. We use our resources. We apply our technology based on the way we've been taught to think about ourselves. And we have been taught that we are a flawed form of life, that We are powerless victims of the world around us. And because of that, this is going to lead into this whole conversation. Because of that, we need a savior. And that savior is being touted as technology. So now we are living at this time where we're being encouraged, indoctrinated, coerced, mandated sometimes to embrace the technology outside of our bodies because we have been conditioned to believe that we are a broken, flawed form of life. And you're seeing this play out in the AI conversation. You're seeing it play out in what's called the transhuman movement, the intentional movement to replace our humanness with computer chips in the brain, chemicals in the blood, RFID chips under the skin. And it's all playing out right now, Joe. I mean, this can't go on for another 20 years because it's moving too fast. This is the generation, right? Now, I'm very passionate about this. The experts are saying unless we change our trajectory right now, we very probably are the last generation of pure humans that the world will ever know. That by 2032, when you go to the supermarket or go to the airport, the people you talk to will be some hybrid, maybe some more and some less, but will have some kind of technology embedded into their bodies. Now, I was on a panel recently, and I was with a group of scientists, and they said, well, what's wrong with that? Isn't that the next step? Isn't that our natural step in our evolution? And I said, no, it is not, and here's the reason. When we replace our natural biology with synthetics, our natural abilities begin to atrophy. Cells will, let me just give a perfect example. We used to be taught, when I was in school, I was taught that we're born into this world with a fixed number of brain cells. And every beer I drink in college,
Yeah, I remember that.
all right, I'm going to lose some brain cells. Well, what I'm going to say next is not a reason to drink the beer. But what they found, there's a part of the human brain, it's the hippocampus, that is producing new brain cells until the last breath we take on this earth. There's a catch, and the catch tells the story. If we do not use those new brain cells in a meaningful way within about 7 to 10 days, the body says, oh, you didn't use it, so you must not need it, and those cells will atrophy and die.
That makes sense because I always feel dumber when I come back from vacation.
Are you drinking beer on vacation?
Not this time,
No.
but sometimes, yeah.
Well, but that principle, so it's called use it or lose it. We've all heard that. That principle applies to every system in the human body. It applies to our cognitive abilities, to our reproductive system. And when we replace our natural biology with these synthetics, this is exactly what's happening. We've been doing this long enough. Virtual reality goggles, for example, they've been around long enough. Psychology Magazine has published article after article. If you take young kids with malleable brains, parents are busy, they want to entertain them. So they sit them on the floor, put a virtual VR goggle on, and 3 or 4 hours a day, and say, "Hey." So here's the kid. They're just sitting there like this, and they're seeing images that they would never see in their backyard, and colors, and sounds, and situations. But here's the thing: it's all being done for them. They are not using their imagination like you and I did when we were kids. They're not using their imagination. So now, what's happening is there are parts of their brain that are atrophying. So they are diminished cognitive abilities, diminished language skills, diminished communication skills. But listen to this. The visual cortex, which is what they're using to watch everything, is enlarged in the brain. The visual cortex gets bigger because that's what's
getting exercise.
That's what they're doing. Now, because of epigenetics, all of that can be reversed. When the kids are put into a healthy environment, go outside and play with your friends, they're young enough that they can reverse that.
Right.
I spent a lot of time with shamans in the Yucatan and in Peru, Costa Rica, places like that. And they found the same thing. The shamans that maybe do, 5,000 ayahuasca journeys because they're leading groups. And every time the group does it, they do it. So, they're doing that. Their visual cortexes are enlarged, but their other abilities are diminished. Now, if you're a shaman in the jungle, maybe that's no big deal. But if you're a software engineer in Silicon Valley writing code for nuclear triggers, and on the weekends, this is what you're doing every weekend chronically, it could be a problem.
Have they done studies on that where they've shown the declined ability or
Yes.
cognitive function due to psychedelic use?
Yes,
Really?
they have.
But any specific psychedelics?
Ayahuasca was one, and I hesitate because there are different kinds of ayahuasca, it's called a brew, different kinds of brews.
So is the idea that people are overdoing it? They're doing it too much?
Well, I want to be clear about this. One-off, I don't think there's any problem if it's done therapeutically. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was speaking at a facility. I was invited as a guest speaker to go with a cohort through 7-day programs. And part of that program was ayahuasca, part of it was breath work, part of it was body work, part of it was natural raw food, the whole gamut. And there was a woman and her husband who came, and they were both healthy. They couldn't have a baby. They couldn't conceive. Her eggs were good. His sperm was good. The doctors couldn't figure it out. And they said, there's something else going on. So they came to this program. And the woman, and one time, she had a plant medicine experience. And in that experience, a being came to her and reached in and pulled her heart out. And it was all black and had stuff all over it. And the being cleaned it off and put it back in, did the same thing with the womb. And she'd been traumatized as a child, had been abused, had not resolved that, apparently, on a deep emotional level. And so there was a part of her that felt that she wasn't worthy to conceive. And it was shown up that way. And in her plant medicine experience, this is what worked for her. And they conceived shortly after. I think they conceived that week while they were there when they did the numbers backwards. Now, as a scientist, can you prove that? Or you can say there's a high correlation between the time that an individual has an experience like that and when they successfully conceive. But that's a one-off, and I don't. Therapeutically, I don't think there's anything. It's not going to be harmful one-off. It's the chronic use for recreation. That's where we get into trouble.
Well, it seems to me the people that I have encountered that use it maybe a little bit too much, they seem to have a loss of a perception of how other people see them. They get slippery, like the world gets slippery. They act weird, and they don't know they're acting weird, and it seems like there's like a piece of the interface has been damaged, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. And I knew no matter where we go in this conversation, to start with, it's going to bring us back to the same place. And I can show you exactly where that slipperiness comes from in just a moment.
Okay.
When we get there. Because, and I'll just say it right now, there's a part of us that doesn't live inside the body, but that the body tunes to, and I'm using that from an engineering perspective, that the body tunes to through the antenna of neurons and DNA. And this is where it gets the fascinating conversation. Scientists now, a segment of scientists are beginning to look at the human body as more than soft, sticky, wet, gooey, mushy, cells and skin. Joe, they're actually looking at us from an IT perspective. Now, this sounds crazy, but they're looking at the human body from the perspective of information passing through and communicating with the world around us. That we are such an advanced form of life. We're not primitive computer chips and wires and chemicals. We're more than that. We're neurons and cell membranes and ion potentials moving across cell walls. And the ability for us to self-regulate what is now being called soft. We are a soft technology. The ability to do that is the core of all the ancient and cherished spiritual traditions in the mystery schools. How we go about regulating this technology. So now let me just break that down a little bit. I mentioned during the Cold War, it's a very civilized war. I remember it was 1980s. I was working. I was civilian, working on a contract for the DoD, and with a civilian security. I had a yellow badge. It wasn't a high. It's secret clearance. It wasn't like top secret or anything. But we had access to research papers that were coming in from the Soviet Union. Even though we were at war on one level, the scientists were still cooperating. And the Soviets were the first that sent these diagrams of a human cell as a circuit diagram. Now, this is a mind blower. I mean, it wasn't a metaphor. Literally, every human cell is a gated circuit. It's got an input and output. It has transistor, the equivalent of transistors and resistors and capacitors. Every cell produces about 0.07 volts of electrical potential. And you say, well, that's not very much. And I agree. And then you do the math. We got about 50 trillion cells in the body. 50 trillion cells times 0.07 volts, it's about 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential in the human body. Every cell is the equivalent of a transistor. Every cell is the equivalent of a resistor, a capacitor. We're photon emitters, and there's a whole science now about reading the photon emissions from humans. And we're photon receivers, and we store information just like a computer chip. And this goes on. Blockchain technology. Our DNA stores information, and the way that it's described is that it is secure, it's transparent, and it's immutable, and it's distributed. And those are exactly the terms being used for blockchain technology today, because blockchain technology in the world actually mirrors the technology of human DNA. We have a record, and you and I, every human body, we have a record of every successful genetic transaction for our species. It is transparent, it's immutable. If you know how to look for it, it's not hidden. It's secure, and it's distributed across all the nodes that we call humans. This goes on and on and on. The point is that we are the only form of life that can consciously self-regulate all of this technology and apply it to our healing, to our intuition, to our resilience, to change, to any of these kinds of things. And the ability to do that is the secret that has been hidden within the mystery schools, within the religions, and it is the reason for everything you're seeing happening in the world today. There's a concerted effort, Joe, to deny us our ability to express our humanness with technology. So that's a big statement, and I know we'll...
But that's fairly recent, right? The effort to stop people from expressing their humanness. That's not recent.
Well, so now we're going to get to the crux of it.
Okay.
So here's, and I wasn't sure how we'd get into this. I lost my mom to COVID just a couple of years ago. And right before she died, she looked at me and she said, Greg, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. And I always got the going to hell part. I never knew exactly what the handbasket.
I never understood that phrase. What is that phrase?
I don't know, but I knew what she meant. And what she meant was the world looked scary to her, Joe, and it does a lot of people. It looked like things were happening for no reason, for no apparent, there was no apparent structure. It looked like things were just popping off here and there, out of control, looked crazy. And she said, this isn't my world anymore. Well, we are in the middle of a process. The process has a beginning, it has an end. We're in it. The only way out of it is to go through it. And that's why I'm excited to have this conversation with you. The two parallel themes that are playing out on our world right now. And we can explore both of them. One, there is a concerted effort for the first time in the history of our world to remake, the stated intent to remake our world and to remake our bodies. Now, we've never had the technology to do that, but we do now. So the intent to remake the world and remake our bodies, that's one conversation. The other conversation, the best science of the modern world, is showing us that we're not what we've been told. We're so much more than we've been led to believe. And we're about to give our humanness away to the technology before we even know what it means to be human if we remake our bodies. So this is in this generation. This cannot drag on for 5 years, 10 years, because all the tech is being pushed on us so quickly. I'm a systems thinker. And rather than get into the weeds of the Democrats and the Republicans and liberals and conservatives, and which is all important, and we can have that conversation, but there's something much, much bigger that's playing out here. And we're in a battle for our humanness. And if we don't claim our humanness, there are powers and forces that will stop at nothing to deny us our humanness. One of the reasons they're denying it is what we just said, because it's through our humanness that we have these extraordinary potentials that empower us as sovereign, critically thinking, self-regulating human beings. And it's very difficult to play out the agendas that are proposed for the world upon populations that are sovereign, critically thinking, self-regulating human beings. So just like...
Well, the problem seems to be power and control. That's the problem. And the only way to have power and control over people is to limit their ability to express themselves and then keep them at each other's throats. Well, and those are two things that are happening all the time with social media. The people that manage social media are consistently trying to limit the reach of people that have voices or narratives that they don't approve of. And ultimately, what you're seeing in other countries is moving to digital IDs. This is just implemented in Europe and in the UK. Yep. You're seeing it in a lot of places where you're going to have to need that to work and vote and travel. And it'll be even more of a constriction on your ability to express yourself, particularly when you think about the UK, which has had more than 12,000 arrests for very mild social media posts.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, I can't believe that. I've been watching this stuff play out.
Fascinating, and the fact that our mainstream media is relatively silent on this is insane. You're seeing a complete, total attack on one of the most fundamental principles of the Western world, which is your ability to express yourself and your ability to call out that you think that the policies that are being implemented in your country are destructive. That's people have always been able to do that. These people are not calling for violence. Yep. They're being arrested for wild things. People are being arrested for liking posts. Yep. They're being arrested. Some people were investigated for viewing posts. 12,000 people arrested by the police in the UK, the same place that just implemented digital ID. I mean, this is an Orwell nightmare coming to life right in front of our face, and no one's flinching. No one in America is freaking out about what's happening in the UK at all. I mean, you get people online that are kind of freaked out by it, but they're way more freaked out by nonsensical things like whether or not what Jimmy Kimmel said in his monologue was offensive. Yeah. They'll go to the ends of the earth to fight that.
Like, they're programmed. That's the programming.
Well, it's easy. You could get Jimmy Kimmel canceled. Fuck him. If you could do that, like, you have some power. You have power. But you really don't. If you look at what's going on, like in the UK, what they're learning over there is that they are in a tyrannical government. And it's slowly but surely, it's got its back, it's got the hooks in, and it's putting the rear naked choke in. It's got them locked up. And they've got to do something about that.
Why do you think that's happening?
Why? Because of what we talked about, power and control and resources. And a very limited amount of people are controlling a huge amount of people. A limited amount of people with fantastic access to resources and the ability for the first time in human history where you have individuals that are in charge of companies that they can shift the entire narrative of the world. Yeah. So they're doing it through these tech companies for the first time ever. Totally unanticipated. 20 years ago, didn't exist.
So I'm saying for the first time, that tech allows for the remaking of our humanness.
Well, it allows for new methods of control and resource extraction. And we found out that data itself is a fantastic resource and worth billions and billions of dollars. So some of the richest companies that have ever existed, they're data companies now. That's kind of nuts. And that's like we missed that. But this is all the same thing that happens with kings and with emperors. It's control. You got to limit the people's ability to rebel, limit their ability to gather resources, keep them at each other's throats ideologically, keep them fighting over the dumbest shit possible, including the color of their skin, fight over everything. What gods you believe in, what foods you eat, what fucking computer you use. Keep them fighting over everything, and then get social media bots to continue that fight going all day long. Meanwhile, closer and closer and closer to total control of the population, where they're even openly stating it. Hillary Clinton said in an interview, if we can't control social media, we lose control.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're not supposed to have control over other human beings. Yeah, you're going to lose the thing you're not supposed to have. An elected official is supposed to be a representative for the people. You're supposed to be a person who's a public servant, where you go out and you do this incredibly moral and ethical and beautiful thing where you sacrifice your time for the betterment of your community and your society, instead of just a means of extracting fantastic wealth that is totally unprecedented and that shouldn't exist in the first place. You shouldn't be able to take that fucking job and then immediately go and start working for some Fortune 500 company making billions of dollars. Like, that's crazy if you're a government employee and involved in any regulatory fashion, and then you go and work for the very industry you were regulating. Or if you're a person who runs for office, you get in office, and then all of a sudden you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars when your salary is $170,000 a year. Like, it's real obvious what's going on. It's just wealth extraction. And the way to do that is with control. You have to have control over people, and you have to be able to censor them, because they're going to call that shit out.
Everything and everything you're talking about is part of a bigger picture. So how deep you want to go?
All the way to the bottom. Do you think the bigger picture is natural?
No.
Like, these are natural patterns human beings follow when they get power and control over people? Because that does seem to be the case. It's just on a much grander scale now.
I think what you're talking about, power and control, lust and greed, there are individuals that have a propensity for those things that are going to fall into those roles very easily. They're pawns. They don't even know that they are supporting something much darker.
And what do you think is the source of this much darker thing?
Okay, so this will open the door to answering Sidonia and everything else that we've done. So we're not totally beating around the bush. We're going to bring this all together. I wasn't sure how deep you want to go with this, Joe. And what I'll say is, I'm going to acknowledge things we're talking about for a lot of people is a very different way of thinking. And it certainly is different from what I was conditioned. I was born and raised in northern Missouri, a rural community. My first degree is in geology and computer science. This is a very different way of thinking, and it's where the evidence is leading us. What our most ancient and cherished texts, whether you're talking about religion or not religion, they say that we are born into an ancient struggle that began long before we ever got here. And for lack of a better term, and this is where words are powerful and they carry a lot of baggage. It's a struggle between good and evil. All right, we're born into the struggle between good and evil. It's not a religious struggle. When we talk about evil, I think it's important to quantify what that evil is. And to do that, we have to talk about who we are. There's something inside of us, Joe, and this is where science is stuck. This is where science and spirituality come together in a beautiful way, and this is where language may fail me. So I'm going to do my best. There's something inside of us that is so rare and so precious and so ancient and sacred and powerful and beautiful that there are forces that have in history and are currently working to deny us access to this force. The force is the reason for the ancient texts, the spiritual traditions, and there's two ways that we can have this conversation. You can say we can do it from a biblical perspective and talk about angels and demons. We could do it from a high-tech perspective and talk about an advanced civilization from another world and another time, and you're talking about the same thing. Exactly exactly the same conversation. As to our origin, there was an intentional intervention that created us. Biblical traditions are giving us one perspective. The Mesopotamian texts are telling us that we are the product of the blood of a higher form of life. And now the archaeological sites are revealing that what's reported in those Sumerian texts actually existed. I was a member back in the 90s.
What specifically did they report in those
archaeologically?
archaeologically?
Let me say, I was in the 90s. I was a member of an organization called BAR, Biblical Archaeology Review, and the idea is that you follow the instructions in the text, and you go someplace and you dig, and there is what the text is talking about from 3,000 years ago. So they use that to try to validate the events, not the religiosity, but the events. In the Mesopotamian texts, when we talk about the king's list, you've had guests on that talked about the king's list in Sumeria. It literally says when the kingship descended from the heavens to the earth, and then it gives the list of the kings, and then there was another flood, and they evacuated, and they came back, and then they created humans, and it actually lines up date-wise with the 250,000 years of when we were created, but there's no religion involved. So two different languages. Are we talking about an advanced civilization and our relationship to them a long time ago? Are we talking about angels and demons from a long time ago? Are we talking about beings with wings in the religious tradition, or when you look at the Sumerian traditions, the kings all had wings as well.
Right.
But they're telling the same story. And what the story is that we are we're the product of an intentional act, and we were imbued with a force that was greater even than those who created us. And that there has been an effort from that time to deny us that force.
Well, how do you know that our force is greater than those that created us?
I don't know that.
Where are you getting that from?
That is from, if you're familiar with the Gnostic texts. In the Gnostic texts, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1946-47, the oldest unedited records of the Old Testament. Push the date back 1,000 years. In 45 and 46, the oldest records of the New Testament and the texts that were excluded were discovered in a little village along the Nile in Egypt called Nag Hammadi. Can I just tell? It's a crazy story.
Sure.
There's not much firewood along the Nile in Egypt, and there was a woman who needed kindling to feed her family, to build the fires, to feed her family and heat their home. And she told her son, go find some kindling, and he was very resourceful. There's no trees, so he found an old tomb. And in the tomb were clay vases, and he opened those vases, and there were documents that were very dry and brittle and made great kindling.
Oh, no.
And we don't know how many were lost before the authorities were noted, but right now there are 13 bound.
They cooked a bunch of them?
They burned, and they used them for fuel.
Oh, my God.
Here's what's left. What's left, there were 13 bound books representing over 50 texts. They were the oldest records of the New Testament, and they were the records that were excluded by the Catholic Church.
Is there any images of these books?
Yeah.
Jamie, can you find them?
Well, I've got them on my... I brought this for you.
All right. Oh, Jimmy found them.
But yeah, so there's the 13 bound texts. So among these were things like the Gospel of Thomas, which is considered the second most heretical book in the Nag Hammadi library. There's the Gospel of John, also called the Secret Book of John, also called the Apocryphon of John, which is considered the first most heretical book. There are books from Gnostic women. Thunder Perfect Mind is a book by a Gnostic woman that's in there. The Gospel of James is in there. So these, and I'll be very clear, if you had Wes Huff here, I know you've had before, and I think he's a brilliant scholar, he would say that these are not accepted because they're not accepted by the church because of dating and because of, there's a lot of reasons, but there's a lot of new research showing that that these are worthy of exploring with the same validity that we give to the other texts that we're
What are they
seeing.
dated to?
They're dated late first, early second century, somewhere right around there. Some of them later. The book of John, the secret book of John, what makes it so exceptional is that he said that it was dictated to him by Jesus of Nazareth after his crucifixion. So it wasn't before, it came after. But the Gospel of Thomas is one of probably the most controversial. It's 114 sayings that were recorded by Thomas, and the book says Didymus Thomas. It was the name, and it's almost like it's different from all the other books in that it is each saying is a teaching unto itself, and what he is saying are. I'm hesitating because we're just covering so much ground here. What Yeshua was his name. What he was teaching was so profound for his time. There were outer teachings and inner teachings. The outer teachings were for the masses, and is primarily what you see in the Gospels. The inner teachings were for those initiates that could really understand what it was he was saying, and that's what the Gospel of Thomas appears to be. It did come from a later time. I don't think it invalidates that, what it is that is being said in there.
What is being said that's so controversial?
Well, there's 114 sayings in there, but the bottom line, and this is one I think that is probably one of the most well-known, where he says, what you bring forth from within you will save you, and what you don't bring forth from within you will destroy you. He's saying there's a power inside of us that has to be expressed. And these texts are all about how we awaken that power. Okay, so the name, I'm going to use a word and then I'll define it. The name that is given to that power traditionally is called divinity, but it has nothing to do with religion. So that association is made because there are schools of divinity that make that, and they're great schools, they do great things. But the contemporary definition of divinity, I love this, the ability to transcend perceived limitations. And that's it. So the ability to transcend, to become more than perceived. Joe, you and I, our listeners, we are living limits that probably aren't even real. We're living within limits that we have been indoctrinated to accept about ourselves. Divinity is our ability to become the best version of ourselves. Expressions of divinity, imagination. I mean, no other form of life can do what we do with imagination. I want to talk about that in just a moment. It's more than just a picture in your mind. And an image in the mind is setting into motion a cascade of chemical effects in the human body that literally change us. We are changed in the presence of the right kind of imagination, and the books tell us how to do that. So imagination, creativity, innovation, empathy, sympathy, love, compassion, healing, forgiveness. These are expressions of human divinity. It's what sets us apart from all other forms of life and makes us such powerful beings. The purpose of evil, and this might be the most important thing that we say today, because it's a nebulous concept.
Yeah, what else?
Good and evil, until you give it a benchmark.
How are you?
The purpose of evil is to deny.
How'd you
human
find out about
divinity.
me, my friend?
The purpose of evil is to deny us our greatest expressions. Imagine.
How'd you find out about me?
I'm not sure about you, but I got invited to the serve. One of my friends invited me.
Okay.
Sure. But he's Jewish as well, so.
Okay, very cool. I'm just watching Joe Rogan for free enjoy.
Imagination, creativity, the ability to communicate and share ideas, empathy, sympathy, self-healing, all of those things. So in a very real sense, Joe, anything that denies those things is an expression of evil. So when we find that algorithms are denying us the ability to communicate our ideas, from this perspective, that's an expression of evil. When we put something into our bodies that prevents us from healing our own bodies, that is an expression of evil. What the Gnostic texts are saying is that we are in a process that has a beginning and an end. And the purpose of the process is to deny humankind our own humanness. That has been playing out over eons, and now the technology is allowing it to play out to a greater degree, because things like AI, things like misused, I'm not anti-AI, it's how it's used. Things like computer chips in the brain, computer-brain interface,
What up,
all
Zoot?
these things, what they're doing, Joe, is they are...
Zoot, how you living, pimp?
What?
What's good, son?
Brother, I asked AI what the most famous crimes would be in the future. Now I'm gonna say something to you.
What's that, big man?
Get fucking lucky.
Why?
Because it explained to me, the AI explained to me a concept called mind rape. That the mind rape sounds different from regular rape. Like the mind rape, like I think I'd rather get regular rape than mind rape. Right?
Okay.
The what it explained about mind rape is it like someone can like upload all your thoughts onto the internet, and like they can everyone will know what you're thinking, and they can put thoughts into your heads and memories that weren't there. That sounds fucking horrendous.
That's wild, son.
Are you scared of just like being famous, that someone, when you become famous streamer, that someone will try to mind rape you?
Well, it's essentially a race to be able to avoid that. And I've got a pretty good head start on everybody with the amount of data that I've been able to generate on the internet.
So, like, how would you feel if someone was like putting thoughts into your head, that memories that weren't there, and like, you know, how would you feel about that? And they could upload all your thoughts online. Every weird thought that you ever had.
Yeah,
How
I
would you feel
mean,
about
I'm very normal, so I think they'd be able to use the data that I originally uploaded and be able to match that against whatever unconventional.
that? But wouldn't you be worried about the other people that told you their secrets and stuff like that information's getting leaked and all that, and those people are going to be mad at you?
No, I'm not worried that they'd be mad at me. They would know that it was unintentional if anything got leaked. But I'm pretty sure that everything that has ever been thought ever gets leaked eventually.